Hello, good morning. Edgardo Sambo here once more. And this time we are still on episode number 32. But we are now on part 2 with the same title, Hell and the Lake of Fire. Be sure that you had watched the video of part 1 and you had read the track of part 1 of this episode number 32 because unless you had viewed it and read the track, you will never understand part 2. Now, on part 1, I had stopped on the Bible verse in the book of Revelation chapter 20 verse 14, in which it said there, "And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire." This is the second death. Now, if we are going to check the Greek translation of this verse, it will sound like this. Revelation chapter 20 verse 14, Greek translation, it states, "And death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire." So, hell was translated in Greek as Hades. Now we have to believe what was written in the Greek translation because the New Testament was written in the Greek language. And hell in this book was translated as Hades. So hell in this verse is Hades or grave. Hades is a Greek word which means grave. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 55, it states, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" This is in the New International Version of the Bible. The word used here was death. Let us try to examine what is written in the King James Version of the Bible about the word death by using the Greek translation. With the same book, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 55, it says on the Greek translation, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" So, the word death there had been translated as grave. In this King James Version Bible, the word grave was used for the word death, and grave in the Greek language is Hades. Therefore, the word hell in Revelation chapter 20 verse 14 is actually Hades or grave. Now it says here that death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. Now, death and Hades, or death and the grave. Now try to understand that the grave will not be thrown into the lake of fire. Hades here means that the people inside the graves who were dead will be resurrected and will be judged on the last judgment, and if proven guilty, they will be thrown into the lake of fire. But it was only mentioned that hell and Hades, or death and Hades, were thrown into the lake of fire. Now, in the book of Revelation, chapter 14, verse 10, it says, "The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb. This place with fire and brimstone is the lake of fire, where the unrighteous were thrown after they were judged on the last judgment. In the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 8, it states, "But the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." This lake, which burneth with fire and brimstone, is actually the lake of fire. Remember that these unrighteous humans were thrown there after the last judgment. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 10, verse 27, it states, "But a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries." This fiery indignation refers to the anger of God, which also means that these unrighteous humans will be thrown into the lake of fire. On part 1 of this episode, number 32, I had mentioned the words Tartarus, Gehenna, and Hades. Now, if you had read in the Bible the word hell, it does not mean right away that this word hell is the place of fire. It has to depend upon its context, because the word hell here sometimes will mean Tartarus, Gehenna, or Hades. Now, to check if this word hell means Tartarus, Gehenna, or Hades, you have to go to the Greek translation of the Bible, because in the Greek translation, the word hell there were translated either as Tartarus, Gehenna, or Hades. Now let me go and try to expound on the meanings of Tartarus, Gehenna, and Hades. Now, Tartarus means a place of darkness or restraint, where Satan and his cohorts will be cast out on the earth before the 1,000-year reign of Christ here on earth. As you would notice, Tartarus is a place of darkness or restraint, while hell is a place of fire or brightness. So, when the Greek translation had stated that the word hell is Tartarus, then that word hell is not the literal hell. It is a place of darkness or abyss. Now, Gehenna. Gehenna means a place of real fire or the lake of fire, where the wicked and the devils are punished, burned up, and destroyed forever and ever. So if the Greek translation had translated the word hell as Gehenna, then we could conclude right away that that word hell is the literal hell or the lake of fire, since hell and the lake of fire is one and the same place. So try to remember, if it is Gehenna, that is now the literal hell or the literal lake of fire. Now let me go to the word Hades. Hades means the grave. All people who have died the lost and the saints are resting there. So if in the Greek translation the word hell was translated as Hades, then that word hell is not the literal word hell. That word hell refers to the grave, and that grave or Hades will be thrown into the lake of fire. But try to understand that it is not the grave that will be thrown into the lake of fire, but those dead people who are inside those graves when they were resurrected before the last judgment and they were judged unfavorably will be thrown into the lake of fire, not the graves. It was only translated as Hades. In summary, hell is not the lake of fire, and the lake of fire is not hell. But hell and the lake of fire is one and the same place. Why? Because unrighteous humans will only be thrown into hell after they had been judged on the last judgment. No unrighteous humans will be thrown into hell without being judged first, and up to now, the last judgment have not happened yet. So no unrighteous humans are in hell yet. Biblically, unrighteous humans will be thrown into the lake of fire after the last judgment. Since this is biblically correct, then no unrighteous humans will be thrown into hell. Then it means hell and the lake of fire is the same place. Hell is the lake of fire, and the lake of fire is hell. Hell was described as forever and ever. The lake of fire is also forever and ever. If hell is here on earth, hell will not be forever and ever, since the earth will vanish during the last judgment. The lake of fire will only be occupied by unrighteous humans and devils after the last judgment. But the Bible did not specify where the lake of fire will be located. When unrighteous humans die, they have to wait for the last judgment to be judged, and if found guilty, they will be thrown into the lake of fire. So hell is the lake of fire. In the book of Revelation, Apostle John saw this place of fire in his vision, and unrighteous humans and devils being thrown into it. And it was revealed to him that this was called the lake of fire. In the other books of the Bible, in the New Testament, the other apostles have described this place of fire as hell. And the apostles knew that this place of fire will be the destination of unrighteous humans and devils after the last judgment. If we are going to analyze the Bible and by using logic to arrive at the right conclusion, then we can conclude that hell and the lake of fire is one and the same place. Hell is the lake of fire, and the lake of fire is hell. My fellow Bible-believing Christians, most leaders of churches, denominations, and fellowships are teaching that hell is different from the lake of fire. If hell is different from the lake of fire, then comes the last judgment. Those unrighteous will be and humans will be thrown into two different places. Some will be thrown into hell, and some will be thrown into the lake of fire. This would be now out of logic because it says in the Bible, punishment will be only done in one place, in hell or in the lake of fire. Therefore, hell is the lake of fire, and the lake of fire is hell. It only happened that when Apostle John saw this place of fire in the book of Revelation, Apostle John called it as the lake of fire. But when the apostles were being taught by Christ about this place of fire, the apostles called it hell. But all the same, unrighteous humans will be thrown to hell or will be thrown into the lake of fire. Some pastors and teachers of churches would claim that hell is different from the lake of fire, that the fire in hell is not so hot, and the fire in the lake of fire is very hot. Then after the last judgment, those unrighteous people who had been thrown into hell will now be thrown into the lake of fire, so that they will be punished more, because the fire in the lake of fire is much hotter than the fire in hell. This will be out of logic. A place of fire will be thrown into another place of fire. That will not be logical. There's only one place of fire. It is the lake of fire. And hell is the lake of fire. Because up to now, there are no humans or devils in hell. And up to now, there are no humans or devils in the lake of fire. This hell or the lake of fire will be only occupied after the last judgment, when unrighteous humans had been judged and when the devils will now be thrown into the lake of fire. So do not believe those teachings that there are no devils in hell with pitchforks in their hands and punishing humans in hell. How can there be devils in hell when there are no humans yet in hell? Who will the devils punish? In fact, when the devils and unrighteous humans had been thrown into the lake of fire, the devils will be punished in the lake of fire. The unrighteous humans will also be punished in the lake of fire. So how can they say that the devils will punish those unrighteous humans when devils themselves are being punished by God in the lake of fire? So do not believe the logic that devils are punishing unrighteous humans who are now in hell, because until this point in time, there are no devils yet. There are no unrighteous humans in hell yet. And there are no devils and unrighteous humans in the lake of fire yet. This place, this one and the same place, hell or the lake of fire, will only be inhabited by humans and the devils after they were judged on the last judgment. The devils and the unrighteous humans will be punished there in the lake of fire. The devils will not be punishing unrighteous humans in the lake of fire, because they themselves, the devils, are being punished in the lake of fire. This conception of the devil's punishing humans in hell is totally erroneous, is totally false, is totally unbiblical. Because when humans die, their spirit will return to God. If they are righteous, their souls will be under the altar in heaven, and their physical bodies will be buried 6 feet under the ground. If they are unrighteous, when humans die, their spirit and souls will be imprisoned, and their bodies will be buried 6 feet under the ground. And comes the judgment day, these unrighteous humans and those humans who have not heard about Christ will be resurrected, and they will be judged on the last judgment. If found guilty, they will be thrown into the lake of fire. But if not found guilty, they will be sent to heaven, where they will stay with God forever and ever. I had discussed this topic on my video, Are There Humans Now in Heaven or Hell? Please try to go over this video. And please try to remember that if you found the word hell in the Bible, do not conclude right away that this word hell is the literal fire. You have to read this in context, not out of context. And you have to check this on the Greek translation of the Bible, because in the Greek translation, it will state whether that word hell is either Tartarus, Gehenna, or Hades. But if it was translated as Gehenna, then that word hell is the literal hell or the literal lake of fire. If it was translated as Tartarus, then that is not the literal hell. If it was translated as Hades, then that is not the literal hell. But if it was translated as Gehenna, then that word hell in the Bible is the literal hell with fire or the lake of fire. So my fellow Bible-believing Christians, do not believe those teachers, pastors, evangelists, leaders of churches who had proclaimed that there are now devils and unrighteous humans in hell. That would not be possible, because up to this point in time, the last judgment have not happened yet. The last judgment will happen in the future. This topic is quite complicated. So if you would like to understand this topic fully, you have to view part 1 of this topic, episode number 32, Hell and the Lake of Fire, and you have to view part 2 of this episode number 32 to fully understand what is the difference between hell and the lake of fire. The conclusion is hell and the lake of fire is one and the same place, and this place will only be inhabited by devils and unrighteous people after the last judgment. I do hope that I had made myself clear, and I do hope that you have understood this topic, because this topic, unless you had understood the Bible, is very misleading. So my fellow Bible-believing Christians, please continue on reading my tracts. Please continue on viewing my videos. which I usually do every 2 weeks. And if you would like to view my other videos from episode 1 up to episode number 32, just go to YouTube, go to the word search, and type my name, Edgardo Sambo, and YouTube will provide you all the videos that I had broadcasted. And of course, if you would like to subscribe, please ring the notification bell so that YouTube will provide you from time to time all my videos that I am going to broadcast. In the meantime, I would say bye bye and may God be with us all. And I hope to see you once again on episode 33, which I will be broadcasting 2 weeks from now. Thank you very much.